Welcome back to the Bonsai Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Addison Galambos. In our search for mastery, we often look towards Japan or kind of the coastal hubs, being that's where I'm located. But I'm really excited to talk with our guest today, who hails from a slightly more remote region. My guest today is Jon White from High Desert Bonsai. Based in the Boise metro area, Jon manages 5 acres, he has 1,000 trees in the ground, and is really a pillar of the local bonsai community there. He's an expert in finding and collecting Yamadori. For those that aren't aware, those are trees that are shaped by the elements that are in nature and then collected. And we're going to talk about his journey, his ethos on collecting trees from the mountains, and then also best practices for those of you looking to start your own collection journey. So, Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Addison. I really appreciate the kind introduction, and I'm honored to be here. Excited to talk bonsai with you and hopefully share something useful for folks listening.
Yeah, leading up to the episode, I looked through your website and I was stunned by you have a lot of really beautiful photos. I love the photography work you're doing.
Thank you.
It definitely shows like the care that you put into your practice. So it was a fun little window into your life, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I self-critique, right? I'm the worst at taking before and afters. So a lot of work goes unrecognized. I'm sure most people can, relate to that. But thank you for the feedback. Yeah. So
I wanted to just start with, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself as well as kind of where you're at in your bonsai journey?
Yeah. So, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, but let me thank my family first because like most bonsai enthusiasts, right? Like I wouldn't be able to do the things I do without that support. But I started off in bonsai about 20 years ago, and for the first several years it was torture, really just doing a lot of things wrong. Being somewhat isolated in, like you mentioned, the Boise area, we didn't have a lot of practitioners. We don't have a lot of practitioners. And so, I got started, did a million things wrong, hit a few singles and doubles and collected got my collection going. But, I knew that bonsai was going to be something I really liked to do once I got successful at it. And I'm not a guy that sits around. I don't sit around and watch TV or any of that kind of stuff. So it pulled me in, and it forced me to continue to learn and be constantly looking for the next thing and moving. And so, I kind of approach a lot of things in life like that. As an engineer in the background, I like to solve problems, and bonsai is a complicated series of problems, right? Or it can be. So, and I like to do hard things. So why not just jump into bonsai and go full tilt? So, I started off about 20 years ago. I'm also in tech, similar to you. And so I was traveling around the world and realized that this is something that's really powerful. I really enjoy looking and working with the trees. As I traveled around, I'd start going into places early, staying a little bit late, building relationships with those that had collections or were practicing. And that really set the hook, because then, wherever I traveled, I'd start trying to bring trees home or ship trees home, pottery, ceramics, or tools and wire, whatever it was. And bringing those things home, it set the bar pretty high when you see somebody who does it proficiently, and then you come back and you're working with like nursery stock or with local clubs to see how they're doing it. It just sets a different tone. And so I started taking it more and more seriously. And then I realized that this could be something I could do lifelong, could really become good at or strive to be good at. And then, when the sports, the kids, the things slow down for you, I wouldn't drive my family crazy by being stir crazy, but it would allow me to continue to challenge myself. And so I joined our local club, started learning some of the right things to do, but, I wanted to really push myself. And so, it was probably 5 years after getting into what I'll call the Bonsai phase, where you get the nursery bought tree or the store bought tree and the Home Depot tree, whatever it might be, to where I was like, if I really want to elevate my game, some of these nursery stock pieces of material are going to be a challenge. And that kind of led me into Yamadori and seeking out some folks that could help me understand how to do that. I grew up here in Idaho. Obviously, I'm 5th gen Idahoan, which is kind of rare to hear nowadays. But I grew up, riding shotgun with my dad, working on landscaping things, and or my grandparents live on the east side of the state and we're ranchers. And so hard work isn't, it's not lost on me. And I think that helped as well. But yeah, it was between the hard work, the seeing proficient bonsai practitioners, and then having my eyes open to things we could do to be, to do that here in Boise or in the Boise area. It just changed my experience or my optics on how to get that done. And yeah, that's basically it there. I mean, I think having been doing this for a while, I wanted to be able to give back as well. And so trying to learn and then give back is probably the biggest thing.
Wow. That's quite the journey. I actually, this is a little bit of a side channel, but I'm curious what kind of engineering you do. I didn't know that you were kind of in the engineering field.
Yeah, I work in big tech too. I'll leave the names out, but yeah, I spent 15 years as a data center engineer.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, so I have a deep background into tech, still full-time job in tech. I do more consulting than anything. And so it was a natural progression to get into something a little more organic. When you work corporate, it's tough to see the ball move down the field, right? And so this was something that you could come home from a stressful day, and not that bonsai can't be stressful, but you could sit down with your trees and literally decompress. And there's something magical if you let that happen that just kind of takes place. And like I said, sports, and I've got a couple kids that are almost adults or are adults now. And so it's really been gravitational for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned to you earlier before we started that I almost lived in Boise. Out of school, I had a job offer at Micron, actually, and they've got a really big hub there.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking a different job, but I really loved Boise when I visited. It was beautiful with the river running through it and everything. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, Boise's a magical place. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also really relate with I'm not I don't have as much of the ranching background, obviously, or kind of that setup, but in my day to day, I really am just on my keyboard or talking with people, and I'm not really building something with my hands, right? And especially in like the software discipline, even on the chemical engineering side, you're not always like physically building something with your hands, even if you're designing something that will be physically present in the future, right? And so bonsai just really scratched a different itch for me than I was getting typically in my day-to-day life, where, I wasn't doing something that had a physical product, and like relied on craftsmanship and this like set of skills and disciplines that I wanted to, like, I really admired and I wanted to have for myself, right? And so it sounds like it similarly kind of ticked that box for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I was really fortunate with my travels through work that helped, not to throw a pun out there, but plant that seed. And then really over, traveling up to 60% of the time for work, you have a lot of time where you're reading, you're on an airplane, you're doing all these different things. And it was just something that it naturally spoke to me. And so, I remember one of the first trips I took was back to the East Coast, and ended up hitting New England Bonsai Garden. And I walked in thinking, wow, how are they going to do this over here where it's cold? You kind of have, it's a similar climate to Boise as far as the cold, but not quite so hot, and we're really dry. But I was like, these guys are doing it at a very high scale. I wonder if I could replicate that. What would I need to replicate it? And that flipped a switch where I started looking and evaluating and really asking lots of questions without trying to be too obnoxious, because I wanted them to let me come back there, right? But yeah, that definitely set a tone and struck a chord.
Yeah. So I feel like one of the biggest challenges for me is, there's really no substitute for in-person instruction and getting critique on your own trees and the work that you do kind of in a vacuum, but then getting someone to say, hey, this is right, this is wrong, so that you're not just perpetuating the same wrong thing 100 times, right? So, I mean, that's the biggest challenge, I feel like, especially in an isolated area. I'm curious, how are you addressing that, or how do you address that? Where it's like, it's great to do work on somebody else's trees at their place, but, ultimately, you got to get some reps in on your own trees, and they have to be right? So I'm curious how you resolve that.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up, and I'll tell you that you're going to do it wrong when you're first starting. and you're going to buy the stick in a pot, and you're going to put wire on wrong, you're going to repot it wrong, you're going to kill trees. It's going to happen. And I think the biggest thing is, do you continue to grow and learn from that? Do you continue to elevate? So, in the Boise area, we had a club when I joined. It was about 30 people, and of those 30 people, there were 10 to 12 active. And so the spectrum wasn't that broad. Now, a lot of those folks have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and so they did have amazing specimen, but even then they were still challenged, and they were going to the different ABS conventions and different things. And at the time, it wasn't something that was really on my radar because of other commitments, right? Life commitments. But I recognized that if I wanted to get better, I had to put in the time, and that starts with material. That starts with reps, like you said. We call it stick time, right? That's a big one. There is no replacement for doing that kind of work, but a lot of people either they don't have the means or the access to that resource, whether it's education. I mean, finding basic resources can be a challenge if you're remote. And that was the case for me, but with the challenge or with the opportunities to get out there, I realized how much relationships mattered. And so when I could go in on the front side of the rear of an event or some travel, I mean, I touched a lot of different places.
Make the time for it.
You do. Yeah. You absolutely do. I mean, I remember, the first time I went down to the LA and hit up Chikugo Inn or House of Bonsai or Kimura. I was just, my mouth hit the floor. And then you make these relationships. They see you multiple times a year, and next thing you know, they're extending opportunities to work with them or look at their stuff and figure out how they do it. And that was probably the most valuable for me. But then starting to go out and do the events, going to the GSBFs and different things, jokingly, right? I put in for it used to be called the John Naka New Talent Competition. And I did that back in 2014. And I felt pretty good going in. I think we had 10 of us that were allowed to go in, and I think there were 160 applicants for it. It was in San Francisco. And so to make the cut to even get in was great. And then, normally you're working on a fairly decent sized piece of material, and this was a 25-gallon pod of like 30-year-old San Jose juniper. It was one of the biggest pieces of material I'd ever worked on. And I tell you what, my heart beat out of my chest when we started drawing numbers and going through it. I'm like, I remember being like, holy smokes, I'm out of my depth. But, you go through the process and you do what you're told, and you try to make the best tree you can with the material you have. And I'm so proud of what I did. I mean, I look at the tree and I'm like, oh boy, wow. The outcome of that tree was not what I was expecting, but it was still fun to do. And it pushed me to become better. Again, stick time. I know that we're chatting about that. And I think that's the biggest thing about, another piece that you and I had chatted about was, one is the evolution of the material. And I can touch on that with the Yamadori piece. But the other is, the resources that you have in your environment. And the thing that kept me motivated too are those folks that were in the club, right? Our local club leaders were a very important part of my maturation and my desire. They kept fueling me to keep learning. And I would get the feedback from them that, hey, you're getting better and this is good. And next thing you know, I'm leading the club and trying to bring back things I'd learned to help raise others in the same positive experience that I had. How do we do outreach? How do we bring this to a broader community? Because when you can get more people in your local environment, they'll bring in their own resources and their own relationships. And that's been really great for our club to grow organically and be able to lean on others with their relationships in, Rebs or Bay Island or whoever, and bring those in, and then get them to go out and represent us, whether they're going to the PBE or we're going to the national convention. We try to go in force and rep our shirts and make relationships. And it's been great.
Do you have any goals for your personal collection? You talked about the PBE and stuff like that, and also leading your local club. I'm just curious, like what kind of goals you have for your practice. Are they community oriented, or do you have goals like for your collection specifically?
I do. On my own personal collection, to touch on the Yamadori thing, because this is a big portion of it, right? As I'm blessed to be able to have that resource and share that resource. And then give students that I have here. I have a handful of students that work weekly with me, and I do have a full-time job, right? But I have a studio, I have 5 acres, and I've got hundreds of pieces of material that people can work on. And goals for me are to constantly be trying to help give back, right? First and foremost, keep that fire lit, keep people motivated, keep learning myself. As far as the PBE or some of the bigger shows, I'd love to get a tree in. And I'm working towards that goal. I've got a couple of specimens that I'm like, this one has potential, right? Been talking to Jonas and hitting up a couple other professionals about some coaching and help. That's more of a personal guilty kind of feel bad about trying to, move that. But, it's one of those things that's definitely on the horizon. I am planning on going to the PBE in 27 as a vendor.
Awesome.
Right. I'm going to drag some trees over. But I think the biggest thing is just keeping people engaged, helping it transform how they look at things, slow people down, and build a good community. And if that comes with them working on my trees or bringing their own trees, I'm all for it.
So you have a kind of also a ground growing as well as Yamadori collection, and you have students and friends come over and work with you on material at your nursery, right?
We do. Yeah. So
Awesome.
I say we because my wife is like an amazing supporter. She has been through this whole journey. I would, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have her backing, right? So that's the we. But we have a family of folks that are the OGs, right? That come out and are here and put in the reps and do all the things. And when you have 5 acres with 1,000 trees growing, and we're talking field growing, right? Trident maples, Zelkova, Chinese elms, you name it. It takes a lot. It's a lot that happens. And again, I don't sit down much. Yeah. So whether it's driving across the state to get pumice, or working with local nurseries for the planting medium that goes in with the pumice, or building collecting boxes, wiring trees, digging them up, root pruning. I mean, there's just a mountain of work that needs to be done, and that window can be somewhat small. In Boise, we are blessed to have 300 days of sunshine a year on average, so we have a really, really good UV index, and it makes a great growing environment, but we also can have really harsh winters and very hot and dry summers. So there's not much room for mistakes. You don't have that buffer, but the outcomes can be great if you're.
Is Boise the high desert? Is that where the name comes from, or do you
Boise
collect in the high desert?
It is the high desert. Yeah. I mean, in our elevation, right where I live is 3,000, 3,500 feet. But you go an hour in most directions, and you can be in 8,000 feet pretty quickly. And you can be and I collect all over the West. I don't just focus on Idaho. I collect all over the West, and there's different things, different targets, different pieces of material, and I have to be very strategic about how I attack that and the time that I'm allowed to get out and enjoy that. But it's a nice little hub that we're nestled into.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Yamadori and collecting.
Sure.
I saw that was featured really prominently on your website and kind of your ethos around it. So I would love to hear how in general you approach it. And then I've got some kind of specific questions as well around, but we can kind of dive into that afterwards. But yeah, I would love to hear kind of your ethos, and like, it sounded like when you were talking about it, that collecting was really your door into higher quality bonsai whenever you were transitioning from Malzai into, whatever was the next step for you. But yeah, I'm curious like how you got into it, and then how your like approach to it has changed over time.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good one. I think that's probably the one that most people will try to understand. And I'll tell you, I've been collecting trees for about 15 years. I started with, little small trees, nothing too wild. And then now I'm collecting trees upwards of 200 pounds, monsters that take a long time to get out. Yeah. And if you go look at Instagram or look at my website, you can see, the full spectrum of that. I will tell you there is a responsible way to do it. There's a way everybody should approach it. And I think that it strikes near and dear to me because I've seen it done poorly. And, whether you're looking at the Backcountry Boys or Randy Knight, both of which are friends, or all three of them are friends, Todd Schlafer, who I've seen his material, and then talking to Ryan, right? Like, not trying to name drop, but folks that are prominent and known for their material whether they're working on it or collecting it, there is a sense of responsibility and sustainability that needs to be taken at a very serious tone. And I don't mean to be a hardliner on this, but I think it's important. I wouldn't say for anybody who's just jumping in to go out and get wild and throwing a shovel in the ground and pulling something out. I think you need to understand a lot of different principles or have a practice or an understanding of what you're doing. You're going to probably fail, but let's minimize the damage, the impact to these amazing trees. And whether you're collecting a Yamadori, right, or a ancient piece off of a mountainside, the same reverence needs to be taken into consideration. If you've never done it, then seek help. There are plenty of resources, whether and vehicles to contact those people, myself included. I have people that ping me all the time and ask questions or want to learn more. And I think it's my job to be responsible and respond and give people good input so that they can be successful and or course correct for that avenue to collect that tree. I think my biggest thing was I didn't jump into Yamadori collecting. If you'd asked me about this 15 years ago, I'd have been like, there's no way. I just wasn't going to be there. But I got out into the mountains to just enjoy the tree, experience the trees. I don't think there's any way to quantify it unless you get out in the mountains and then really see how these trees grow in their environments and then assess what they can be. Whether it's a Western juniper or a Sierra, Rocky Mountain, whatever it is, there's a gravity around those trees and a reverence that needs to be taken seriously. I think, the first and foremost.
So what does that look like in practice? What does that gravity translate to in terms of concrete things that you should or shouldn't be doing?
Well, so first things first is there are no shortcuts. Respect the land, respect the tree you're digging up, and then ultimately respect yourself so you can look in the mirror and know you gave that tree the best chance it could get to succeed and survive after you collect it. Get permission, get your permits, do all that stuff. Understand the timing of which you're collecting that tree. When's the best time to collect it? Is it spring? Is it fall? What does that look like? And understanding that species will help you understand when that window is available for you. And then having the proper tools to extract it, having the proper setup to take care of it when you get home. Does it need a heat bed? Does it need a cold frame? Does it need to be, have a sweat technique provided to it? What do all those pieces look like? What substrate should you use? Should it go into a ceramic or a box? Anderson flat, what does that look like? How do you stabilize that tree? As I traveled around, I got to see lots of different ways of success and lots of ways of people failed. I can tell you that Randy and I didn't become the most prominent collector in the world by just slapping things around. And I'm not trying to sound negative, but I think that there is definitely a respect that people have when they do it right. So if you haven't done it, then like I said, seek out those that can help you. Lots of clubs have people that collect just for themselves. And so I'd say reach out to them, shoot, give me a ring. I'll help you out. Yeah. I mean, what would you think would be if you were going out to the sticks to grab a tree or remove something from someone's yard? What would be your number one concern?
Well, I've done a little bit of collecting, like maybe 1 to 2 trips, getting 1 to 2 trees the last, 3 years. And what struck me as kind of a beginner collector is that each tree species and each location has its own idiosyncrasies or its own specialty
like microclimate
items.
Yeah,
exactly. And so you can't take the way that you collected this California juniper at this location and collect a Sierra juniper the same way. And so I think there's just caution that you need to take whenever you're going into these environments. And I try to just take it slow in terms of go with someone who has experience so that you're doing it so you're getting a head start. But then also whenever I collected Sierra juniper for the first time this year, I just collected one to see if I can have success with the technique that I'm using that's hopefully good, but I want to get verification of that. And then, once I feel confident in, that species, then I'll kind of ramp it up. But that was one thing that struck me was I was expecting, I've already collected juniper, so this juniper will be the same. And the environment posed a lot of different challenges whenever I went to look at Sierra for the first time, as well as just the post-collection process. I needed a little bit more of a rigorous setup than I had originally had. So that was, I guess, something. But yeah, I'm definitely not an ultra experienced collector, but that was something that I thought of last time I or like in
Yeah.
my most recent experiences.
And that's a sound approach, right? I mean, you start with something easy, start with something that's manageable. Not everybody wants a massive tree. A lot of people do, but I'd say if you've never done it, start with something simple that gives you the best chance for success. Because I'll go out in the mountains, and then I'm constantly looking for locations, tagging trees, permitting and all that stuff. But I'll walk past thousands of trees to maybe collect one. If it's not the right time of the year, I tag it, I GPS tag it, and then make notes of it. I can tell you where every tree that I've collected comes from. I can tell you the time of year, exposure, all of those things. And that's come with time and reps. And there's a reason behind that, because you don't want to go spend that time climbing up into, Timbuktu to have those things fail. And early on, people are just super excited. Typically, I'm speaking stereotypically here, right, or broad spectrum, but a lot of people that want to dig up Yamadori think it's just as simple as running in and grabbing it and then packing it out. And maybe there are some options or some opportunities that are like that, but for the most part, you're looking for something specific and with a specific geological feature, specific exposure and character, and you need to find those and then be able to seize that moment at the right time. And it defeats the purpose if you bring that tree home and it dies. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you collected it and it wasn't worth bringing home. I've had that. That experience too. It's like, okay, I got this and it's living and it's fine and it can become a bonsai, but like, is this really that much better than the thing I could have just bought off
nursery
the shelf?
stock?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
exactly.
like you want to like the whole value is the uniqueness, right? And so if you're collecting something fairly bland, then maybe it doesn't hit that. But it's good to start that way, right? To gain some experience on something that's maybe a little younger. But I'm curious about I've seen some pretty cool or some pretty wild like post-recovery setups. And I'm curious about how you approach that in like an arid environment. Like, have you used any kind of like grow tents plus humidifier type setups, or how do you approach that like post collection recovery?
Yeah,
in your kind of
that's a good question.
Environment.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good one, and that's probably where the battle is won and lost, right? With Yamadori for the most part. And I don't mean to downplay it. Getting the tree out, getting the tree home, if you do it right, is the easy part. The danger is after that collection. The ICU, we'll call it. The ICU looks like, a staging environment. So when the trees come home, there's a proper process for taking that tree and getting it secured in its collection box or whatever that meeting is going to be. I typically put trees in boxes. I think that's the best approach. And I say that broadly. And then securing that tree, allowing that tree to reproduce roots. Some trees don't need a whole lot, depending on the time of year. They don't need a whole lot of, they don't need that extra babying, but there are more that would benefit from a, heat bed. Pumice is my favorite substrate to use post-collection. Doing that, securing the tree, pumice, box, heat bed. Some trees need to be sweat. They just need to have a bag put over the top of them to help them recover and not dry out. And so in Idaho, that is definitely a challenge. I have multiple setups. So I've got a greenhouse. I have heat beds. I have a shade house, and then I can transform my greenhouse into a shade house when the weather deems appropriate, depending on the species I have in there. And then if there's anything above and beyond that, that's kind of a custom type deal. So I have I think the heat bed, to be honest with you, is probably the best chance for helping your trees succeed afterwards. Some need a combination of heat and shade. That's a tough one too. And in our climate, that's very important. But misting systems, I have a full-on misting system, and I can angle that to treat certain trees more than others. They're on different zones, and that's helped. That's probably been the best way to help the recovery numbers year to year. So yeah, it's I think as I look at some folks that have collected, like, not to give away any secret sauce here, but there are some collectors that collect hundreds and hundreds of trees every year, and they'll heal them into wood chips or just pumice beds without actually having the tree put in a box. And I think that works in certain climates. Idaho, we're not that lucky.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, we're not that lucky. The other thing is, if you establish a tree in a grow box, a recovery box, it allows you the ability to move that tree. And in Idaho, where we're growing, that's very important. You know, I might have a tree that's 250 pounds and it takes 3 people to lift it. So you build a gurney and you do all the things, and that might spend a good portion of the first part of the year in a greenhouse with a humidity, check on it or buffer with a heat bed underneath it. And then, come June, it's going to need to be transitioned into full shade or morning sun, afternoon shade, or whatever it may be based on what the tree is telling you. And you need to be able to move those around. So the grow box needs to be robust enough to move and provide that flexibility. So that's worked out well for me. And then the other thing is, if I'm selling these to folks that are out there, and I'm probably one of the few that still ship trees, that grow box has that tree established, it's anchored in. And then if I go to ship, typically don't have to, MacGyver anything super crazy to get it to be secure. Or if somebody comes to pick it up, I know it's stable, it's locked in. So
yeah. How do you balance people wanting to buy trees as soon as they're off the mountain and the fact that, you need to wait to see if it establishes and grows? Like what's your personal kind of, how do you balance that in your business?
Yeah, I won't sell a tree unless I'm 100% certain it's recovered. And there's various ways to tell whether it's new growth that's hardened off. I won't sell a tree until I'm 100% sure. I won't ship a tree if it's not the right timing, or I don't mean to sound bougie, but I want to make sure that the person that's receiving an ancient tree knows what they're doing. And I like to talk to folks on the phone and have that interaction, to be a little selective and just make sure, because, don't get me wrong, I think everybody has the best intent, but if you're shipping a 250-year-old tree to somebody who's never purchased a tree, that could be a little concerning, That's
a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. And all the trees will tell you, I mean, if you're a horticulturist or know the trees you're collecting, which you should, you get the signs of their health and their vigor pretty quickly. And I've had trees, I've pulled out of the ground in the fall, and by spring on a heat bed, they're growing through the bottom of the box into the heat mat or into the ground. And it's like, yeah, that's a pretty much slam dunk. You're great. Those are kind of unicorns. But then I've had some that I pulled out of the ground. They kind of limp for a year or two. And I won't sell them for 3, 4, or 5 years, depending on what they're telling me. So,
wow. Yeah. I think the hard thing to balance is just that, you have an awesome tree and people want it, right? And so
yeah,
I think well, I guess they could always, market to like, hey, once it's recovered, I'll buy it or whatever, right? But
that's what most do. The biggest thing is, especially this day and age with all the social media aspects, you can see a million trees and all the photos, and it's pretty great. And as soon as I put up a photo or a video of walking through the recovery house, you get hammered with a bunch of people. Exactly. Yeah, which is great. It's a good problem to have until, they get pushy, and don't get me wrong. Everybody's, like I said, got good intentions. It makes me chuckle. But I already have, and I put out a video a little bit, and I've already got people that are tagging trees. They're like, hey, as soon as that comes available, let me know. I'm like, you got it. I've got my repeat customers that I love, and I like everybody, but there are some that just buy, a lot of trees. And so they typically get first pick, and most of the trees, by the time I put them on social media, don't even make the website. Yeah. So, note to you guys out there, if you're looking for material, then just ping me. It might not make it on the site. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty shocking. I'm not advocating that people do this, but as we were talking about recovery, I think I've seen some shocking like before and afters of someone collecting something with almost no roots and then putting it into the proper post-care environment with the right humidity and the right amount of shade, and being able to slowly, recover that tree. Now, I'm definitely not saying that you should do that, but I'm just saying that to underscore that the people who are doing this successfully and at high volumes, they really know exactly how to make the trees that they collect tick, and they know how to have a higher recovery rate via these specific techniques like heat beds and the right soil and the right size container and the right transition into sun and shade, the right transition into, arid versus humid. So there's a lot of variables that go into it. And like, I think what you were saying earlier is like, you really owe it to the tree to either have that experience before you do it, or like via research and talking with people who know it. Right.
Absolutely. And, if you're buying trees or procuring trees from people that don't have that experience or don't know that they can stand behind that tree, I'd question that. What I like to tell folks, especially when they're first time customers and we establish that relationship, is if it can recover here in Idaho, it's going to succeed pretty much anywhere because I've got trees, ponderosas or westerns or Rocky Mountains, whatever they are, that they can make it here. They can pretty much make it anywhere because they have to deal with both ends of the spectrum. But yeah, I really stand behind that. Make sure you're doing the tree justice and doing your customer and the community the justice they deserve.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that's central to your practice, and it's good to hear. So I'm wondering how often you get surprised. Like, how often does a tree that, like, you collected it and something went a little bit wrong and you're like, yeah, this one's going to make it or this one's not going to make it. Like, how often do you get surprised by the outcome? Like, a year down the road, can you pretty much always tell, like, this is definitely going to make it, this might not make it? Or, how often are you surprised by an outcome when you're collecting? Or is it not that much now that you're pretty experienced?
Yeah, not so much now. I'll tell you the things that used to throw me off that were there. So there's my nemesis tree, which is the mountain mahogany. But I think you've heard probably if you've listened to Mirai or have listened to other professionals, right? That's the one that everybody has failed. And I love it when I talk to Randy and I've asked him about that. I'm like, have you ever collected one? He's like, yeah, I've collected a handful of them. Don't waste your time. And I got on a Mirai stream years back and asked him about it. And I actually had collected a handful of them and the majority of them lived, but I actually, it was super frustrating. Anyhow, I digress, but I don't get as surprised anymore because I'm not quite as ambitious as I used to be about trying to get something out that just didn't want to come out of the ground. I now have tried to hone in on the features that say this is high percentage versus low percentage. And I don't waste my time. I don't disrespect the tree and trying to go for a low percentage tree. There are trees that are high 90s success rate without really thinking about it because of where they're at and how many I've done, or I know the area really well and that species really well. And then there, occasionally you'll pull something out of the ground. I mean, there was I'll give you a scenario. There was a tree that was going to get removed and was going to get dozed over. And I pulled it out of the ground right as they were getting ready to do it with a chainsaw and a pickup. And I do not suggest this, right? And it had very little roots. It was deciduous. Proper aftercare on that tree didn't skip a beat. So now it's, it's like the size of my thigh and about 5 feet tall. But, it's an opportunity to at least save a tree and make it into something. Somebody will enjoy it at some point and it's growing really well. But, yeah, it's about dialing it in and being realistic with what you're trying to get more than anything.
Yeah. Obviously don't have to go into any secrets, but can you give some examples of like how you kind of read the tree for seeing whether it's viable for collecting? Just like some concrete examples of like what
sure.
People like what you're kind of keying into when you're making that decision.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is let's just take a species for example, right? Like my favorite species is the Western juniper. They're all over this environment. They're all over from Nevada into California, Oregon, and Washington. So they're prominent. I think they get a bad rap because most of the examples you see, they're not as unique as the stuff that we get. But there are very specific geological features I look for. I try to find rock pockets, right? I don't think that's anything anybody would be shocked or earth-shattering. There is a substrate, media, soil, clay that holds that tree. But there's in some of these environments, you'll see specific bark patterns or movement in the tree that will tell you, is that tree ever going to come out? Is it just grown into a fissure? Even in a rock pocket, you'll sometimes have that tree grab hold of, a small, what I'll call void, and it will fill that void because that may be where the water goes as it melts off in the spring and it fills that void with roots and it becomes so bound, even though you can maybe wiggle it a little bit, there's still something in there that's anchoring that tree that if you take it out, you're going to probably split the substantial amount of roots to where it will fail. Those are ones, and what happens in those environments typically, and I'm not giving away any trade secrets here, but you'll see a different bark pattern and a different movement in the tree because it has been containerized by that rock vessel.
Interesting.
It ages differently and the bark takes on a different shape. At least that's what I've noticed. And I could give you hundreds of examples of those that I've had to leave behind, but those unfortunately are always the best looking trees because they have this rattlesnake appearance where they twist on themselves and turn into knots, but they just, they'll never come out. We call them forever homes. They just stay out there and look amazing. And they become some landmarks in my quests out. I take students out or people and I love to show them the examples of these, right? So if they're never coming out, I like to revisit those and they give you a good visual cue of like, oh man, that's an amazing tree. But I've tried some fun techniques too on trees with trying to ground layer and do different things. It's not something that has
success with that.
I have done it and I have had some success. Is the juice worth the squeeze is probably the question. I guess if you have access and you can get out there readily and check it multiple times a year, then I'd say, yeah, why not go for it, right?
I've heard about people trying, or one of my friends was mentioning that he wanted to try root grafting in place. Is that a viable technique? I guess you have to be out there a lot to water it, but...
I'd say if you can get out there frequently enough, I don't know many trees that are bound in a rock pocket that you could keep wet in an arid climate or at a high elevation consistently.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you've got maybe you live next to an outcropping you can get onto, I'd say go for it and probably make an amazing tree.
Yeah. I had never heard about the bark differences. That's definitely something I'll look for when I'm out on the mountains.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing I've noticed. I'll try to get out when I get out this spring and take a couple photos, put them on Instagram for people to see.
That would be so cool. Yeah, that would be really neat.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing that I've noticed, and it wasn't just me. It's been a couple buddies that we go collect with, and so I know I'm not I'm not smoking crack when I say it. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I think those are the things though that you build up over seasons of doing this, right? That help you have such a high success rate, right? And
I'd like to think so.
You just don't know those things until you've tried it. And that's why I think it makes a lot of sense to be more cautious initially, because there's just those things that you have to learn by experiencing them.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people, a question I get a lot, if I'm doing an event or teaching a class or workshop is, so you just drive down the road and get them off the side of the road or on the side of that hill over there. And I say, no, it's absolutely not that. Now you can dig those kind of trees if you have access and permission, and you might get a little gem every now and again. But typically in those environments, there's nothing to control or contain that tree. So you're either getting a young tree that might have some fun movement, snow load, rockfall, whatever. But typically those roots are not contained and they're running all over. And so now you're challenging yourself to get that into a manageable container while compressing and building the tree out, which in my opinion, it makes it just as challenging as getting well done field grown or nursery stock. So
yeah.
Again, juice
I
worth
think
the squeeze.
There is an art to collecting Yamadori has definitely given me a lot of respect for just buying it off the shelf from someone who's done it expertly, right? It definitely makes it make sense why the cost is there. It's like, it's just very time intensive, not only the collection part, but for an old tree, you might have to wait even 2 or 3 years before it's sellable, right?
Sure.
Maybe a younger tree, you might have that like roots out by June or whatever, but that's not going to be the case all the time. And it's like if you're collecting a tree, you might maybe not making it into a bonsai until 3 or 4 years later, right?
Sure. Yeah. And then also, what is your outcome? I love Ryan's approach with what are you trying to achieve? Because if you're looking for specific features or a specific species, take the time to get it. And if you don't have the skill set to go get that tree, then let somebody, whether it's me or Todd or whoever, let us do that and then find that piece of material. Or if you are looking for something specific, I have customers, they're like, hey, I'm looking for this. And I will hunt for it. And when I do, I'll let you know. And
that's funny. Healthy. I've never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you think about it. If you're looking for a twisty trunk and you want something that's got good deadwood on it, that's going to last. Rocky Mountains are great. I'd say Western junipers have a very dense hardwood that doesn't break down, and those are great. And after talking to some other professionals, they're like, this is just as good as, I guess, some foliage on them that is shimpaku-like, looks just like broccoli and is really, really dense. But others are like, a little leggy and they want to graft. So if we can get you the trunk and all the movement that's going to be sustainable, then, it goes back to what are you trying to accomplish? Graft it over and let's get you something that you can enjoy really quickly, or at least faster than trying to grow it in the field or manipulate it otherwise.
Yeah. What's your take on the sustainability of collecting? Because obviously the US is very big, but trees grow very slowly, right? We're looking for these trees that are hundreds of years old. So once you clean out, I'll say, like an area, realistically, it's not like timber farming where you can harvest it again in 10 years or whatever, right? So yeah, I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I think that it comes back down to expectations, ethics, time. For me, I don't throw a number out there that I'm trying to achieve, right? I have a full-time job, and my goal with High Desert is to provide the best level of trees that I can while it's fun and I enjoy it. So I don't have a magic number I try to hit every year. I go out and I spend the time in the mountains and I track it so that I can be productive and efficient. But that's why I started field growing, right? When Topirian went down and some other growing operations that I knew were smaller went down, there was a massive void. And not everyone wants to spend $5,000, $10,000 on a collected tree. And so the $100 trees, the $300, $400, $500 trees are good. And then as I get older, I don't know how long I'll be able to do it. I'm striving for a long end game, but putting trees in the ground just was a natural progression to help. And the sustainability piece is I try not to go through and just wipe out an area, right? And again, there are so many trees out there that I can never collect that I don't really see that being a problem. I see legislation and or poor ownership of the land, those things, fires, being more detrimental to the collectability and the availability of it than I do over collection. And that's my skewed opinion. I mean, I spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a year all over the place. And there are far more places I can never reach that have amazing trees in them than the ones I can probably get to. And that's hiking. I've done 20 miles in a weekend or over a couple of days, and I have yet to worry about running out of that material, short of a natural disaster or legislation making that change.
Inaccessible. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I wonder what the ratio of bonsaiable trees that get wiped out yearly via fires, for example, or climate change or whatever, versus collecting. Like I'm assuming it's probably a lot more trees are lost to beetles and fire than people out there collecting. Not that makes it okay or not okay. I'm just saying, like, I hadn't really thought of it in terms of that before.
Yeah, I mean, think about what happened on the West Coast. Over the past few years between the fires in Washington, Oregon, and California. I mean, they've decimated some massive amounts of acreage, and there's probably lots of trees in there that went up in smoke. But the West is huge, right? The West is massive, and if you do it right and take care of it, I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I wonder what I don't know enough about the history of collecting in Japan to know what caused I think it's illegal now. Like, you can't collect in Japan in certain regions and things like that. I wonder if it was like they just reached a density or like popularity of the hobby to which it did become a problem. But yeah, at least in the US, most places I've collected were actually like public land where they have the bonsai permits, so it's like, okay, it's definitely allowed and accessible by the government here, right? So it'll be curious to see if over our lifetimes that changes at all. If scrutiny comes on this practice, or whether it's viewed as innocuous as it currently is. So
yeah, I agree.
It certainly is an amazing resource to have for bonsai, for both like progressing the level of trees in the US as well as excitement for bonsai, right? There's something that's undeniable about looking at a collected tree that I think makes the practice much more unique.
Absolutely.
and awe-inspiring.
Yeah, there's no way to mimic what Mother Nature does on her own and what time does, And again, I stress that if, I think what I've experienced is kind of one side of the spectrum or the other. And I don't mean to sound judgmental in this, but I think when you're young and you're eager and maybe you don't have the resource to go buy a really nice piece of material, it sounds more appealing to go collect something. And I'm all for that, right? That's how I got started. But I went with several people over the course of several years to learn. And these people were providing trees to Boone and to Ryan. And so I knew I was in good hands learning that. And that made it palatable and attainable for me. Now, I would be willing to do that, and I am doing that with my own students and with others to show them the proper way. It's not something that you pick up the phone and you call me, I'm going to say, hey, let's go jump on the rig. But if I get that feeling from somebody and they put in the time, I'm definitely going to help them achieve that. And I think that's how most practitioners want to be. I will tell you then the other end of the spectrum is they are late, they retired, they have the funds, and they just want to go buy something powerful and transform it, which I'm also for. But if you don't have some runway on how to take care of that or the resource to help you with that, either a professional, a club, or something else, I'd say that's just as slippery because you're going to provide and spend $10,000 on a tree, then kill it. It's like, oh, that's just as much a punch in the stomach as anything too. So I think just making sure, again, what's that outcome and then are you equipped to handle it is probably the biggest piece. And I think, I'm here to help, and resources like you, Addison, with conversations like this from professionals and getting their experience should help set that tone and foster that community mind to help people out because, we're all here to get the same outcome, I think, is enjoy these amazing creature creations and pass it on.
Are there species that, again, not saying folks should or shouldn't, but I'm just curious, are there species that you would say for someone who's getting into collecting with hopefully somebody knowledgeable guiding them, are there species you'd say, hey, this is probably somewhere that's good to start versus kind of the opposite, somewhere where you're like, yeah, stay away from these? Well, we know mountain mahogany probably isn't the first bet.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
On the West Coast, at least, or like Central and West, what would be your recommendations for folks?
I think, yeah, that's a good one, and that I'm gonna fall back to find out what grows well in your area, right? That you can manage, collect well. Is it successfully growing in your area? And to give you an idea about Boise, the Boise area, we have tons of, similar climates to Boise. We have tons of poplar, we have tons of Siberian elm, hawthorn, hackberry. Those are deciduous species that are very tolerant of being removed and recover well. I wouldn't say you necessarily need to start with any of those in specific, but if I was saying, hey, you're in Boise and this is what you're going to do, then those are prolific, easy pieces of material. It's going to be different in California. Oregon and spots is very similar. Then you get into stuff that could be a little more challenging. And I think some of the conifer species can be a little more challenging because you don't necessarily see the downgrade of them right away. They might take time to wither. And so that aftercare may be critical and you don't understand that. Whereas a deciduous, you have a little bit more queuing, and this could be debated. Bonsai nut might blow up because I made this statement, but I think deciduous can be a little bit more forgiving. The techniques on those are a little bit easier to understand because if you're collecting them out of season, then they're going to be out of leaf and you can kind of get into those and see what you're doing. Yeah, I think it's just assessing what's available in your area is key.
Makes sense.
And then using that as your litmus test.
The other question I have for you, and obviously this is not enforceable, but do you think that Yamadori collection should only be reserved for folks who have a certain experience level or like advanced or expert practitioners of bonsai itself? Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. I know that's a spicy one, but
I could get myself in trouble with that, right? I think you need to identify. Yeah.
I just thought of that one and I was like,
that's a good one. No, that is a really good one because, obviously being protective of where the trees go and how they're managed afterward is huge because you put that time and the effort and all the logistics. But I've had some people that are fairly new to bonsai that have bought Yamadori and have done extremely well with them. I've not sold trees to people because I didn't think they were ready for them. And some people may say I'm a jerk for that. But I think that if you have the mindset and if you're willing to put in the time, then I don't have a problem with it. I would say maybe don't go buy that $10,000 tree that requires 4 people to move it if you don't have the infrastructure to support that. But yeah, that's a slippery slope. I would say start with something small or make sure you have that infrastructure, that support group to help you navigate that. I would also open it up to say, hey, and I'm not trying to get a bunch of phone calls, but my number's out there. You can hit me up if you have questions, and I'll walk you through it. I have folks that come multiple times a year out to the nursery and ask me questions about previous trees, or if I've seen this, or get a text message with it. And so I think, being available for people, that's my job. My responsibility is to be a good business owner and a good support mechanism for people. But I think it also requires some restraint to go, hey, this tree is ancient. I need to treat it as such.
From one standpoint, collecting a tree from nature is the most accessible way to get into bonsai, right? Digging up your local Yamadori and getting started, like, it's free. You can do it with the shovel you have in your garage potentially. But then there's the flip side of it where it's like you could also find yourself in the mountains collecting a 500-year-old tree and have no idea what you're doing, right? And kill that tree. And so, yes, digging that tree in the woods or in the mountains is accessible from a cost, and like, if you're able-bodied, you can go do that. But like, you're going to have a very low chance of success. And like, is it fair for your learning experience to come at the expense of something that's irreplaceable, right? And so
Agreed.
That's the kind of dichotomy that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking, hey, should Yamadori collection only be reserved for advanced practitioners, right? And it's kind of the struggle between, are you gatekeeping something versus is that a realistic thing that makes, preserves the most respect for the trees that we're trying to
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it is a slippery slope. I lean more to, if you don't know about it, if you don't have experience with it, you probably shouldn't go out and risk it. I equate it to, I don't think anybody jumps on a bike for the first time and then the next week, they go out and they ride the Tour de France, right? And so the difference is that tree's age and provenance is significant. That tree is probably going to be just fine where it's been growing for that time. And so I would err and say, again, find a resource that can help you and learn a little bit, take some baby steps. And chances are, if that tree is that old and you are really that, you have that desire, it's going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And I think there is a difference between digging up 1,000-year-old tree in the wild versus, the guy on Craigslist said he wants to get rid of all of his Japanese maples and he's going to ditch them. And like,
100.
Big difference there between those two things. And both, like, maybe one's more appropriate for a beginner, obviously, than the other. Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing is, Yamadori might not always be the best way to get into bonsai because it's not quick, right? Like we were talking about, you have to wait for the tree to recover before you can actually do any bonsai, right? It might not be in a bonsai pot for 3 years, minimum. So, or 1 or 2 years at the minimum, I guess. But it can be an accessible way to kind of get higher quality trees for folks. So,
without a doubt, I think one thing that is misunderstood about Yamadori is, right, you bring the tree off the mountain. Let's just say everything aligns. Bring the tree off the mountain. It goes on a heat bed, and we'll use a juniper, for example. It's pushing roots the next spring. The tree sits in the nursery, fills in, gives you all the signs it's great, gets put up for sale the next year. So it's 1 year out of the ground. Perfect situation. Lands in somebody's hands. I tell them to get it home and then not do anything to that tree for a year. Go through a full year's growing cycle so it can somewhat acclimate to where it's going to be. And you can really assess the tree's health and how it is responding in that change over that year. What should it do? And also lean on me. I can tell you what I would expect it to do, and I try to leave people with a good, idea of what that's going to do over the next year or 2 years. So 1 year sitting with you, and now you can strategize, you can start to style it, you can start to do the things to make it your tree, and then you might pull it out of the box and find out, okay, this root over here isn't growing as well, or this root mat on this side isn't as good as I thought it might be, and that would change your whole perspective. You might put it back into a box after manipulating, cutting, angle change, whatever that may look like, and then you're back to another box. But I'll tell you, at the end outcome of that is probably going to be far faster than getting nursery stock there. So don't be in such a rush. It's still way faster than the alternatives.
That's true.
But it is just setting our mind in the right way to appreciate it and realize it's not coming overnight. I think, most bonsai practitioners that have been doing it a while will tell you that, we're so quick. I mean, I remember the first bunch of trees I got. I just slapped them into a pot, wired them all up, tried to do it all in one go, and then wondered why the tree failed. So Yamadori can be the same way. Field grown could be the same way.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I wanted to hear maybe a little bit of a story from you if you have one that aligns with this. But is there a tree in your collection that has like a crazy survival story? Like that tree that something accidental happened and there was one root left on the tree, or you really didn't think it was going to make it, but it pulled through and now it's crushing it. I'm curious if you have any that stick out in your mind of like, wow, that one was close, but it
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything that's super exciting. I can tell you a couple that were aha moments for me or have some provenance
yeah,
or
that'd be great.
some gravity to it. I got into bonsai, like I said, and 20-ish years ago, and I joined the club, and I thought these little trees are going to be super amazing. And I'd buy the stick in a pot and take it over to my sensei, and she would stop working on this like amazing, majestic Japanese maple forest was this time in particular. And I'm bringing over like this bald cypress whip, it's like nothing great. It's got like 3 branches on it. It's like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree. And she stops working on her tree and then, comes over and like a kid with a straight A report card or something, and takes the time. And I worked with this lady for 17 years and, started realizing the impact. And this is probably what set the tone for how I look at our club. I can tell you without a doubt this is. But she would do that time and time and time again every time I'd show up. And she was a local resource. She lived a couple miles away from me. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. But after doing this for a number of years, she's suffered with some mental health issues and she had to get away from bonsai fighting dementia. And her family gifted me her collection. And so I have a big majority of her trees that are priceless, obviously, with just the provenance, the dedication she put into it. And some of them were in poor condition, some of them in great condition, but those trees will always be symbolic and have an immense amount of weight around them. She also gifted me on like my second trip over there a Burt Davy ficus. I've had it in my collection the longest. It's posted up on my site. It's in a little blue container right now. It's about 45 years old, tropical, which, in Idaho, yeah, it has to come in the wintertime. But that is probably one of the most special pieces of material I have. And because it was gifted by her and she's no longer with us, there's just a sense of reverence around that. I can tell you the same exact thing for one of the first times I went down to California in like 2010, and I visited the Ishii families, a nursery, Chikugo-en, and I got a tree that Masa Ishii had grafted, Shimpaku, juniper, and it's in my collection now, and I've had it since then. And it's got flaws, and it was a tree that I think I paid $80 for. At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta have to carry this home on the airplane and all the things. And he passed away a couple years later, and yeah, it's one of those things where it's got some gravity to it. And I've got another one more. I'll give you one more. Is I collected a tree that I'd been looking at for about 4 or 5 years, and I hauled my dad up there to the mountain and had him walk out on this slope, and he helped me lug it out of there. And it's sitting on one of my benches now, a big old ponderosa pine that its nickname's Chewbacca, because it's this big ugly thing. But yeah, exactly. And the big ugly thing, but you love it. It's like it's got the big needles and the massive trunk. But when people come over, they look at that tree and like, oh my gosh. But a tree's like 300 something pounds, never moves. Just when it gets worked on, I gotta, muscle it off the pedestal it's sitting on. But those ones are kind of the things that help set the tone, but they also help keep me grounded. I like to, every time I look at those trees, there's a story behind every tree in the garden, but those type of experiences help remind me of what keeps me going. And when you see somebody else, whether it's a student or somebody at an event, and they light up and they have a connection, that's pretty powerful stuff. And if I can help people get that experience, it's priceless. And that's what it's all about. So, yeah.
I love that. I think that's consistently come through tonight, is that you have a really big focus on the community and fostering the group. So like your club in Boise sounds like a small but mighty group. And I'm sure you've grown since you joined. But I mean, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I wanted to ask you,
good.
like club, someone who's involved with their club to another. Yeah. What do you think's the most important thing that clubs can do to foster their own community. I'm just curious, like what's worked really well for you.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things that have really catapulted or elevated our local groups. One is we started a beginner series, like a 101 bonsai, to get new people involved. We've evolved and done a 201 that is taking some of the 101 graduates and then put them into a 201 where they can work on different materials. So they feel like they are progressing into different species. And in that process, connecting them with different leaders within the club that can help them work on whether it's wiring or styling or whatever that may be. I think the other piece is we have a couple of really good shows that we do locally, and we're trying to get a little bit more of a regional exposure. Our local biggest event is the Boise Flower and Garden Show every spring. We have about between 12 and 15,000 people that come through that exhibit, and we typically show. Last year, I think we had 70 trees in there, which is crazy to think about for a small community like Boise.
That's excellent.
Yeah. But elevating that and then leveraging the other online resources, whether it's Jonas and his documentary of his progression and how to properly display and what makes a quality stand and the elements is huge. But getting people to slow down and actually understand why they do the things they do. And none of that can be replaced without some one-on-one coaching, mentorship, and things like that. So that's where we're trying to go and I'm hoping that some of the investments I'm making with material or just time and availability will help do that. Those are probably the biggest things. The other portion is stuff that works for you, Addison, and Cali won't work for us in Boise. Timing is different. Some of our soil mixtures are a little bit different.
Totally.
A big thing that people will get is they'll
horticultural is so contextual.
Yeah, they'll move here from. I have a lot of folks that are transplants that move into the Boise area from California, and we've had a few that bring pottery or bring their trees, and they're in these tiny pots, and we just really struggle with that unless you're home all day and you can water 3 or 4 times a day. When it's 110 outside in the summer, that tree's in full shade and it's still going to be nuked by 10 a.m. And so we have to sometimes swap aesthetics for practicality. And so your trees might be over potted or have a severe amount of top dressing or something on them to just keep that soil or that tree healthy. So yeah, that horticultural piece is big. And then I think the last piece I'll touch on is just making sure that we're getting the questions that our customers, that our patrons have addressed, right? You have to kind of treat them as customers, right? The club members need to know that they can come to people with questions and not feel slighted or made fun of. I always tease everybody, I'm only going to make fun of you once and in front of everybody, but I'm just kidding. But, it needs to be an open place. And I think most clubs do that, but they can be a little scary if you're new and you don't want to walk in and ask questions. Absolutely. And so being open and available for people to get answers is the key.
I love that. One thing that we struggle with in the Bay Area is, like, as a club, we don't have a lot of space and it's a lot of work to grow material. Yeah. But growing material or having access to material can be a great, there's nothing better than giving somebody a tree when they join, for example, right? But then as a club, we'd have to find somebody to stable that or grow it or maintain it. And so it's tough. So I'm curious how big of do you find yourself using your nursery and your collected material as a resource within the club, and how valuable is that, or what does that enable you to do? Yeah,
that's a great one. And it wasn't something I envisioned when I first started, 15 years ago. It was like I just wanted to go out, collect cool trees, and then share my story. But when we moved out here on the acreage, it was like, how can I best maximize this and then do it organically. I don't want to become an organization and have investors or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to sound negative, right? I'm just saying that the things that motivate me are it's not the sale. It is not the dollar figure. It is the impact to the community and to elevating others so that one day my collection and maybe the facility goes to somebody who can keep it going in support of others. So, that's tough to think about, and it's tough to strategize. How does that look 5 years, 10 years from now? And it started with, putting 300 trees in the ground, growing them from seed. Like I made that decision. I was like, all right, I'm going to cultivate trees from seed and then move them into a growing bed and then move them into growing field. And in the process, figure out what I do and don't like about that. But to the broader question, it takes a community, right? The windows to execute certain things, whether it's pruning, repotting, creating a root over rock, or tiling a tree to get good nabari. All of those things take time and resource. And so what I've tried to do is make this so for my students that are full time is as we plant trees and move them through the growing cycle year to year, they take and tag trees that they like. And then there's no monetary exchange, right? But then there is a investment in time to create and understand how they created those trees. And we've got some young people that are learning how to do this as, I don't think of it as a trade, but it can be thought of in that way. We need more people that can grow and keep these resources going. And if this is a kickoff for that, I'm fully in. And so every year as we do this and we plant more trees and move them through the grow beds and the different stages, I've got resources I can count on that I know are going to do it. I can show them the way that I've done it and been successful. And then they get a tree, handful of trees, 10 trees a year that move through that cycle as well. And then they can take that practice onto their own growing beds or whatever. They grow out here and they move them through. And then, in 4 or 5 years, they can have a really, really nice trident maple or Chinese elm or whatever that looks like. I'll tell you, just to put this out in the ethos, if anybody has some connections for some of the more exotics like the apricots and plums, I would welcome some connections. So just put that out there to the ethos. Anyhow, but that's kind of a mantra.
Other species.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's giving me goosebumps a little bit. I love it's almost like the garden is your nursery and your field growing operation is providing I don't know the right way to put it, but like, it's so much more than like you're able to provide a tree for a demo. It's the work and the community that goes into developing these trees over time that multiplies upon itself and is like the seed that starts a community that flourishes, not just, hey, we're able to provide a tree for a demo at a lower cost or something like that, right? Which is amazing. That sounds really powerful and really
thank you.
The key to like a community building approach to.
Well, it is a little self-serving. I'm not going to lie, right? Like I know I'm not going to go be able to pack out
some free farm hands.
And I'm not going to be able to pack out a 200-pound tree in 20 years. I hope I can, but if I can get this moving and get a community of people around us that know what they're doing, I can not to sound sacrilegious here, but I saw the Karate Kid. I want to be Mr. Miyagi. I want to retire and sit in my studio and have people come over and we can work together and I can grow old working on trees and be known for good collective material, but also good field grow material and supporting the community in the right way. I mean, if I can hang my hat on that, I'm good. I love it.
Well, I mean, that's just what I was going to say is like, sure, there's some self-serving element to it, but I'd rather have a lot more people with your mindset than a lot more people who want to be Elon Musk or whatever, have $1 billion. It's like, which one's going to make the planet a better place, a more interesting place whenever you're done? Like what mindset?
I agree with you.
I think the mindset that you have is really powerful. And
thank you. I appreciate that.
It's been awesome to chat with you tonight. I'm really hoping, are you going to be in Japan for Kokofu?
I'm not able to go. Okay. No, I'm super jealous, but I'll be watching IG and then all the videos that come out afterwards. So you're going to be there, right? I'll try to put out some stuff. I'm hoping I don't miss any episodes in February, but I might, depending on, I probably will because of my audio editing setup is here in the US. So I'm going to record some awesome content while I'm in Japan though. And that'll be great. Hopefully be releasing that. And Jon, do you want to you've already thrown the gauntlet out there that people can reach out to you for advice. So if you're brave, you'll give out your where can people reach you? How can they connect with you? Yeah, you can hit me up on my website. That's, a little old school, but it works. highdesertbonsai.com. And then I'm on IG at High Desert Bonsai. My phone number's out there. It doesn't take much of a Google.
No PII.
No. You don't have to. You can Google it and find it. It's pretty easy to find. But I welcome anybody reaching out and I truly want to support the community. So thank you, Addison, for having me on. I appreciate it. And what you're doing here is tremendous to the community. I can't thank you enough. I've really enjoyed watching or listening to your podcasts. I've listened to every single one, some of them multiple times. And it's amazing what you've been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time. So I'm honored to be here and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I definitely hope I can take some of your community building mindset and keep applying that to how how I'm growing the podcast. And just like you, I'm hoping to put out the energy into the bonsai community that makes it the place that I still want to be, 60 years from now. Right. And hopefully even better for the people who join it in the future. So
yeah, I think you're unstoppable, my friend. You're well on your way. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. Hopefully, at the very least, we'll see each other at PB in 2027. So
yeah, sounds good. I look forward to it.
But
yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you, Jon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good night.
You too.